Hey guys, it's Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. I'm doing a little video here because several of you asked, how do you port match heads the way I do it? Now, honestly, you're not supposed to, you're supposed to make the port entry the size you want for the area you want. But in most cases, let's face it, people want to go through a traditional size. So for instance, these are my Brodix Dragon Slayer heads. They come already at a 1206 entry. You can make the entry larger, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting more cross-sectional area, because the push rod pinch is going to limit you. In other words, it gets skinnier right through here. So yeah, it's wide here, but then it shrinks down. You can make them taller, like a 1207 tall, and then you can gain more cross-sectional area. But for the most part, people are 1206. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't technically gasket match. You're supposed to actually port match, where you have a port here and that's size for what you're supposed to be, and then that port's supposed to line up size-wise and same dimensions with your intake. However, for the most part, a lot of people just use gaskets. Like this one's a 1206. This is my ported Dragon Slayer. However, this problem occasionally happens. So I'm going to show you a problem that happens and how I'm going to try to deal with it. Just to let you know, this is the mock-up block. It's a junk 350 block. It was donated long ago. Anyway, it's got head gaskets that are underneath the heads on both sides. And then what I do is I've taped the intake gasket here underneath, which I'll pull off and I'll show you in a minute. But I've taped it down and I've set the intake on. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll put bolts through here and then I'll drill alignment holes, which I'll show you later. So this way you could always have a perfect match. There are other ways, by the way. This is just one. However, we've got a problem here, so there's no sense in doing it. If I look down here, hopefully you can see, get my camera right. Try to look at the roof of the port. I want the light. There you go. I know I just saw it flash through just a second. There you go. Can you see the blue of the Felpro gasket at the very top of this port here? See that? That's not good. The roof is higher, the intake is higher than the head. Now, you could port the head to make it larger so that this way this doesn't happen, because this mismatch is the worst one. It's far less harmful for the engine's horsepower if you have the intake smaller than the head. This setup is much worse, having the intake bigger than the head. It creates issues, especially with air. So what do I do to fix it? I mean, what can you do? For the most part, you guys can't do much. By the way, I know it's really hard to tell. That's about 110 thousandths. I need to pay attention to the floor too. There's a step there. Now here's what I can tell you. That step's about 60 thousandths. So, and that's important because what I'm about to tell you what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this intake off and I'll mill each side down 60 thousandths. That should line up the floor of the port with the floor of the head. That should get me part of the way there. After that, I'm going to have to grind the head to get it perfect. In this perfect situation, this wouldn't happen. Now, this is a 2892, which is pretty rare right now. It is almost like gold. This guy bought it used, and if you know anything about these manifolds, they come already pretty close to a 1206 with some heavy radius. However, whoever owned this before me decided to do some port matching, and they didn't do a horrible job, but they did enlarge it, and that's why the floor should line up. Like once I mill it perfectly, that floor should come down and that roof would be at the same line if it was done right at the perfect 1206. However, someone got a little crazy with the grinder, so it's taller up top, so I've got to do some things. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mill it off. I'm going to put up my mill. I'm going to mill each one of these, and hopefully you'll get to see them in a second. I'm going to take 60 thousandths off this side and 60 thousandths off that side. This should make the intake sit lower, because if I'm milling it off, it sits lower. That should hopefully get the roof line to line up with the roof line of the head. However, being it's so tall up, it won't. So you might say, well, why don't you just grind up, mill more of it off so it lines up? Well, the problem is then at 60 thousandths, the floor will come in, be a perfect alignment with the head. Now the roof will still be high. So if I milled off more, now the floor is below it. I don't want that. So in other words, I'm going to take 60, that should get the floor to line up. The head will still be high. So at that point, then I'm going to have to make the heads do something ridiculous by grinding the actual cylinder head to make it match the intake. It's a horrible way to band-aid. I mean, it's one way to band-aid it, but it is not the perfect world. That you shouldn't have to do that. It should be you port the head and manifold. There's cases where you have things just go wrong. This just happens to be one. So milling down to get the floor to line up with the floor of the head. And hopefully that reduces some of the top of the roof. If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the head and grind that out. So in essence, I'm making the port itself on the head larger. Sometimes you just got to make sacrifices and compromises. This is one of those. However, you might say, why don't you just go get a different intake? This really, in my view, in my opinion, this 2892 from Edelbrock that you can't get now, brand new, is the best intake for a 4150 for a small block Chevy. That's my opinion on a 4150. If you said Dominator, probably not so much. There's others. Now, this still has a lot more port work for me to go, so it's not going to go on like this. It's going to get a whole lot of work, and you get to see it all done anyway. But I hate the way that this looks, because all my work will be done here, and someone eventually is going to get secondhand this intake. It's a matter of time. And they're going to look at this and have my signature on and be like, oh my God, he's such a beautiful work. Then you look at the port match on it and be like, what is that? Let me show you. What is that? It's not horrible, but I didn't do that. Look how thin the dividers are. So now I got to thin these out too. I hate that. That little bitty thing to hold a gasket. Anyway, more grinding on my part. All right, so get ready to cut this part off. So here I have the intake all set up to be milled. It's a fixture. I'm using my mill, the same one I mill heads with. I should point out too, this should point out how warped intake manifolds are, okay? This is 4000s. In case you're wondering, I leveled from here to here, from here to here. I measured the distance on each one. And so they were within the thousands. So that's how you level it there. Then I leveled it from here to here. So from here to here. And then I let it cut. So 4000s. See what's here doesn't get over here. So there's your high spot here. Low starts going high again. So yeah, these intake manifolds are usually warped. It's what sucks about milling them, because you do your best to get them level, but they're already so badly anyway. They're all over the place. So I'll take another 2, and this should be at 6, and we'll see what it does before I can actually start really cutting. Yeah, so here and here were the same. Here and here are the same, which you can kind of tell because it's hit both here. Low here. Crazy. This is 6000s. So 2 sides here, 1 here. Yeah. I'll keep going until I tell you when it cleans up, but I've got to take a 60 total off anyway, so whatever. But this is like, I don't know why my intake keeps leaking. There you go. This is 10,000s. See how it's still not clean? Anyway, yeah, I gotta go 60 anyway, so it's not a big deal, but there you go. Pretty warped. Here's a little extra thing for you with this manifold. Now I mill at the top to make it have more plenum volume. It also helps with airflow because it's not been as restrictive. Well, anyway, I chopped this up in the mill and then I did some cutting. You probably don't have a mill, but here's just a little tip I want to tell you about how you do with some of the stuff. After you've levied out your lines that are straight on each side, you might try to figure out, how do I make this a nice curve here? Like, how do you get this perfect scribe? Well, here's what you can do. You can grab an object that's round and find one with different diameters to figure out what would work for what you're doing. And then simply what you do is you'll take your rounded object and you'll line it up with each line, and then you'll scribe the line. And you'll keep messing with it till you find one that covers both sides, both lines, this one, and connects them. And then you got your perfect radius. That's what I do. So that's just a little thing. This just happens to be just my Max Film Roll Purple. It's what I use for my fluid for my porting, and it works out great. Anyway, here's something else to note. You see how it looks like it's got more material here than here? Well, the reason for that's pretty simple. There's a gasket I use for this, and the gasket I've used to measure the thickness, and I've been doing this one forever. And the gasket's perfect. So I put the gasket up here on the studs and I scribe my lines. Well, here's the thing. There is core shift, so the aluminum will shift one way or the other. So even though it looks like this has more here than here, In reality, what happened is the whole core shifted over this way, which really what it means is I'm gonna have to grind more on this side than I will on that side. It's just nature of the beast with castings. It's don't try measuring from here over and here over to get your deal, because it won't be in the center with the plenum. I'm just telling you. All right. Well, the other thing I'm going to show you real quick is this. Okay, now I've taken the head off the mock-up block just to show you this. Now I want to remind you again, this is just to fix an error, because in theory, that intake's at 1206. So when I milled off the bottom, it should have brought it exactly like this, because this is 1206, but it didn't, because someone else had already kind of boogered it up. So what I did is just to recap, I put the intake on, and I scribed that line on the top of the roof and that line there. Now, of course, I can't reach on this far one because of the way the intake was running, and I could probably on this one. However, so what you do to fix it is you only really have to have one on one. You'll need this. This is a square, and what you'll do is you'll find a machined surface, and each head's kind of different. So for a small block Chevy, of course, we got this is machined here. Sometimes they're machined up here. If you have, of course, it's got a solid rail. What you're really looking for is something that should be run perpendicular to your line or parallel. So in this case, you just do it, and I've got that measurement there. And then what I'm going to do is I'll take a scribe line, and I'll go all the way across the entire thing, bringing that line through all of them. And that's how you transfer it to each one. So you only have to measure one. Now, if you're wondering about the side one here, what I do is I will make the mark here, of course, because I scribed it. Actually, it's on that side. And then I measure the intake manifold, and I know the distance between it, and then I scoot over and measure and scribe a new line. That's it. Now, is it going to look perfect? No. This is just pretty much, like I said, fixing a band-aid of an issue. Typically when I do them, they're not like this. And I'll probably do another video where I'll show you the total correct way that's usually done. This is just a way for you guys, if you get an intake manifold you're not happy with, but you found it cheap and you're trying to get it to match your heads, this is what you do. Because remember, it's better for the heads to be larger than the intake manifold. Here it is all scribed. If you notice that I got a little crooked down here, that's because the square itself only went down to that mark, so it kind of went off there. But these are, square. You can see how much I have to take off the top. And that's it. So I'm going to do these, and it should match with the heads because the floors are already matched, so it's good. And you just have to do the same thing on the other head. You're good to go. So anyway, hopefully that gives you some information on what to do when the manifold doesn't match the heads and you have to do something. Now remember, this is a Band-Aid. This is not ideal in any situation. So anyway, this just makes it better than what it would have been. Thanks for watching.